We've talked about this last 2 months. I'm going to hop back onto it just real quickly. This is Chinese steel production. And the only reason why I want to keep touching on it is because, in my opinion, one of the big points of the tariffs overall, whether it's the United States or any other part of the world, and putting tariffs on China, is just because they've been overproducing for the last decade, probably. And they've been driving the price down and making it very difficult for other mills to be profitable, while arguably they're being subsidized by their government. Well, this chart, and if you look at the kind of sky blue, the light blue line, that's showing, this is a seasonal chart, so it's showing versus the last 8 years. We are currently sitting at a production rate that is at an 8-year low for Chinese steel production. So, is that coincidental, or is that related to tariffs and people kind of putting up their own walls against China? I think it probably is related to their response to people being protectionist and kind of saying, no, Mas, we don't want to keep buying this very cheap steel that perhaps is being subsidized. So, and why that matters, I think I'm a very big visual learner, and this isn't a chart, but it's a graph or a visual. The left-hand side, that is the size of China's steel industry, and I would even say this is a fairly conservative estimate. I've seen estimates suggesting that they've got capabilities of producing up to 1.4 billion tons. But relative to the rest of the world, they are larger steel producers than the entire rest of the world combined. So again, when we think about that phrase I brought up, where when China gets a cold, or when China sneezes, everybody else gets a cold, this is sort of what that is. If China's steel prices are at $430 a ton, there's no way you can't ignore that. You can put up walls as much as you want, but unless everybody in the entire world puts up their own walls against China, at some point somebody's going to want cheap commodities. And so those things still seep out in the economy. China obviously still has friends that they can sell to that don't have tariffs on them. But I thought this relative, just visualization gave a really good visual as to why people are taking such a firm approach to China's overproduction.
I wouldn't have had India in the number 2 spot if you had asked me to put me on the spot.
No, I mean, they've certainly made a lot of investments over the last 10 years. Perhaps not coincidentally, their PMIs are and have been the strongest that we've seen over the last 3 years. They're also, them in China, they're the world's biggest population. So from a steel per capita usage, they're actually probably much lower than where China is and has been. So they probably have a lot of room to grow. They probably aren't going to grow quite at that rate, just because they are seeing and have seen what's happened to China and the way in which people are kind of demonizing them for their overproduction. But yeah, they're a massive country and certainly growing into their own.